Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Building a Progressive Administration, a conversation with Neil Eggleston. My name is Hirsch Furiganti. On behalf of the Washington, D.C. Lawyers Chapter of the American Constitution Society, it's my privilege to welcome all of you to tonight's event. I'm really excited about the chance for all of us to hear from Mr. Eggleston and really get a chance to get a good conversation going on what really the job of the White House Counsel's office is and what kind of goes into building a progressive administration. Just a couple of housekeeping matters to start off with. I do want to make the note that ACS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It does not support political parties or candidates for public office. I would also like to make a note to thank all of our co-sponsors. In addition to the Washington, D.C. chapter, we also have the Northeast Ohio chapter, the New York chapter, the Chicago chapter, the Columbus chapter, the Virginia chapter, and all of the 3 Florida chapters have all agreed to co-sponsor this event. So a huge thank you to all of them. Additionally, and I'll make this shout out at the end as well, I do want to make a quick note of 2 initiatives being handled by ACS National. First, ACS National is creating a talent database for lawyers who are seeking presidential appointments. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, please visit the ACS Federal Executive Branch Appointments website. Additionally, the Progressive Talent Pipeline is seeking to identify individuals to train, endorse, and recommend as candidates for roles in Congress and the executive branch. They have a deadline of November 15th. You can find out more about them at their page. And the links to both are going to be posted in the chat so that all attendees can kind of make sure to get the information from there. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, Neil Eggleston. I would say he needs no introduction, but I'm going to attempt one anyway. So Mr. Eggleston is a graduate of Duke University and Northwestern University School of Law. He clerked for Judge James Hunter on the 4th Circuit and for Chief Justice Warren Burger on the US Supreme Court. He has a very long and very distinguished career, including serving as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, serving on an investigative committee for the US House investigating the Iran-Contra scandal, serving as associate counsel in the Clinton administration. He has had a very long career in private practice as well, including at the firms of Howry, Debevoise and Plimpton, and Kirkland Ellis. Most notably, Mr. Eggleston served as White House Counsel under President Obama from 2014 to 2017. Since then, he's been a partner with the Washington, D.C. office of Kirkland Ellis, in which capacity he is presenting himself to us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Eggleston for any remarks he'd like to make to start us off.
Well, thanks, Harsh. And let me just say I'm very pleased to have gotten this invitation and very pleased to talk to you today. I have a long association with ACS and think that the work that it does has really been fantastic. They were helpful for me when I was the White House Counsel. Since leaving the White House Counsel's office, I've spoken to various student chapters around the country, probably a dozen or so now, and have really enjoyed that. And so I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward sort of to this discussion. And so I'll turn it back to you to start the questioning. Let me just also say to everybody, I'm sure that Harsh and I will have time or make time or whatever to respond to any questions or comments you might have. Among other things, you don't have to agree with me. It's okay if you disagree with me, but if you have any comments, sort of in some ways responding to questions from all of you is the most fun part of this. And so if you got something, I think there's some sort of a Q&A function or some way you can ask questions and we'll try to get to all of them. So Harsh, but for now, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. I'd like to second that. If you scroll to the bottom of your Zoom screens, you should see a button that says Q&A. You can use that to send any questions you have during the discussion. You don't have to save it for the end. but we will try to save some time for questions from all the attendees. So without that, let's jump right into it. And Neil, if I can take you back to when you first started at the Clinton administration. So, at that time already you had clerked to the Supreme Court, you had been a federal prosecutor, you'd worked on the Hill. So what led you to join the Clinton administration? What was kind of the impetus for that?
So this is, I'm going to tell this story, and I think it's a worthwhile story to tell, partially because it's an object lesson, because I'm certain that there are people who are observing this who are thinking to themselves, geez, I think it'd be pretty fun to work in a White House counsel's office or in the, at the Department of Justice or whatever. It was for me both surprising and not surprising, and I think that'll probably be the way it is for all of you. As I said, I had been in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, came down to do the Iran-Contra investigation for Congress. And if you remember, sort of pretty much right at the beginning of the Clinton administration, some of the investigations started and culminated. I know for a lot of you, this is history, and I'm talking about it as if it happened yesterday, and to a lot of you, it's very much history. But Vince Foster killed himself, which promoted a series of investigations. The White House counsel at the time was a guy named Bernie Nussbaum, about 10 years older than I am, who had been in the Southern District of New York before he went to Wachtell. And there were some people in the White House counsel's office who I also knew or knew of through some of those connections. But the real way I got in, I think, was two ways. But one way is I'd gotten to know a woman by the name of Ricky Seidman, and those of you connected for a long time to ACS will know her. I think she's on the board of ACS now. And at the time, she was President Clinton's scheduler. She'd been a personal friend before Clinton was elected. And the thing that happened, and again, no one's going to remember this but me, but Joycelyn Elders was an African-American who had been nominated to be the Surgeon General. And she was the first person of color to go through a tough confirmation after Lonnie Guinier was withdrawn, which created a lot of consternation in the civil rights community. Joycelyn had some tax issues, and the White House asked me to come in and work with her and get her confirmed. And so I worked with people in the White House counsel's office, and I worked with people on the Hill. And when the whole thing was over and she was confirmed, I had lunch with a couple of us and Mac McClarty, who was the president's chief of staff. It was a sort of a thank you lunch to those of us who had worked pretty hard on it, which was an example of how important it was that Joycelyn Elders get confirmed, because if two people of color had blown up in succession, it would have been a real unfortunate experience for the Clinton administration. But as a result, I got to know Mac McClarty. And then the Clinton investigations started up. I'd gotten to know people, and as a result, I think of that, I was asked to come in and do that. So one of the points, I'm probably made this point a couple of times, which is the thing about jobs at that level is that there has to be a sense of trust in you, and that you're going to be on the team and you're not going to leak. And that sort of you're pulling with the same oar as everybody else. And I'd had a chance. I didn't really know the people in the White House, but I had a chance to get to know them a little bit, and they saw me work during the Joycelyn Elders matter, and I think that's what caused them really to come back to me. So, and the second thing was that it looked as if the investigations were going to start. Obviously, they got started really by Christmas of the first year, and as everyone knows, remained essentially throughout President Clinton's entire 2-year term. But I think those are the two reasons I was invited in. So I sort of gave a long answer to that, because you think to yourself, I ended up working in the White House counsel's office. I must have had some connection. I must have known President Clinton. I'd never met President Clinton before I started in the White House counsel's office, but I had an opportunity to show that I was competent and that I was, I could be a team player and loyal and wasn't going to leak. And those last three qualities are super important. I think if you think about it, very different from particularly the beginning of the Trump administration, where there were so many people who were not really on the Trump team. And so I'd never seen leaking out of the White House the way that we saw at the beginning of the Trump era. And then the only other thing I want to say, I'm sorry to pack so much of this into the first question. I should have sort of parceled this out, although I'll probably come back to some of it. So when I went into the Clinton administration, I guess I was about 40. But I went in as an associate counsel. I wanted to be the deputy. The deputy slot was open because Vince Foster had committed suicide. And basically, Bernie said to me, "You're not going to be deputy. And so you either decide to come in as an associate counsel, which is the next level down, or you don't come in because I'm not offering you the deputy slot." He was a brusque New Yorker. He's a wonderful guy, but this is basically what he said to me. And so, like a lot of people, and probably like some of you, what I tell people who are thinking about going into administration is, typically you get a job a level or below the one that you actually think that you're entitled to. And I use the word entitled on purpose because, we're all sort of hot shots and we got great resumes and all that kind of stuff. And, I really should have come in as a deputy. And I thought, I'm working in the Clinton White House. I'm going to be in the counsel's office. And what do I care what my title is? And it turned out to be the right decision. But it was a level below the level I thought that I should get and wanted to get. And I decided finally, the heck with that. This is my opportunity to serve. And I sort of should go ahead and do it. And so I made that decision. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question, Harsh. But that's, and I told it in sort of, as I said at the beginning, in kind of a long way to show that these things can happen in sort of accidental ways. Other people in the counsel's office, there were one or two people who came from Wachtell with Bernie. One or two people had worked heavily on the campaign. One or two people were from Arkansas, obviously where the Clintons were from. And so people other than me had a more obvious connection to the White House and the White House counsel's office, but there was room for me.
So if I can ask a follow-up on that, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Did Mr. Nussbaum ever give you a reason why he wasn't going to give you the deputy spot, or was it just age, or he had someone else in mind?
No, I think actually, so he never told me. And I'm now gonna guess, but I think my guess is right. So I think that Vince Foster, who'd been at the Rose Law Firm with Mrs. Clinton and was quite close to the president, was selected as deputy counsel before Bernie was selected as the counsel. And I really think that Bernie's view was that was not his job to give away, that he didn't have the ability to offer that to me. And so in some weird way, because Bernie and I had a very similar background coming out of the U.S. Attorney's Office, although again, he was 10 years older than I was, I became quite close to him. I was never deputy. There's a deputy office, but it wasn't filled for quite some time, actually. So there was a period of time that it was just open, and as obviously when I showed up, the position was open because of Vince, and it was months before anyone was selected. And the person who was selected was not someone who was close to Bernie. It was Joel Klein, who then worked for Bloomberg in New York, Chancellor of Education or something for a while. But anyway, it was Joel Klein is the one who took it, and had no particular connection to Bernie, which increased my view that probably the reason that Bernie didn't offer to me was it wasn't his to offer.
So if I can, let's fast forward a little bit and
right.
Jump to your second, and I think probably considerably more prominent in recent memory anyway, stint at the White House Counsel's Office, which was your time in the Obama administration. Can you talk a little bit about how that process kind of worked, what what caused you to come in at that point?
So this is almost an odder story in some ways. So in 2012, I left Debevoise and went to Kirkland. And I'd not particularly worked on the Obama campaign. I mean, I'd given money, I hadn't given a lot of money. I think I shook Obama's hand at some inaugural ball, but I didn't really have any connection with him because I'd been in the Clinton administration. I knew a lot of people in the Obama administration, but I wasn't particularly close to President Obama. Kirkland had hired a headhunter to find somebody with my kind of credentials. And so when I'm talking to Kirkland about going there, I said to him, look, because I know they're going to have to pay this headhunter a lot of money. I said to them, look, whenever there's a newspaper story about who the next White House counsel is going to be, I'm always on the list of the top 4 possibilities, but don't worry about it. I don't know them. That's because reporters have to come up with names. It's not because anybody inside the White House is telling them I'm one of the top 4. You know what I mean? They come up with these names. So I said, just don't worry about it. And so then I knew the 3 prior White House counsel, the first being Greg Craig. I knew Bob Bauer. I knew Kathy Rumler. I knew them all fairly well, I guess. And one day, Kathy, who was my predecessor, called me and said, do you want to come to the White House for lunch? And I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. I'd love to do that again. And so I went, and she talked about whether I would be interested in doing it. And so we talked for a long time. It was then a while before I heard, and then I got a call from the president's assistant saying, the president would like to have lunch with you. Could you come over and have lunch? I think I'm the only person he had lunch with. I don't think this was, I think I'm kind of a busy guy. I don't think he interviewed 10 people. I don't know that for sure, but I think probably I was recommended to him and he was deciding whether to either offer me the job or say, find somebody else. I don't think he interviewed a whole bunch of people. I remember we were at lunch. The Oval Office has a little corridor off of it that goes back to his private dining room, and we're having lunch in the private dining room. And so there's iced tea. I can't remember exactly what the food is, but I remember the only thing I was really thinking to myself was, I don't actually need food. What I need is not to knock over my iced tea. And so I basically just played with the food, didn't eat very much of it, didn't knock over the iced tea, and figured I just needed to kind of get through the day. So anyway, I think I have thought and have again assumed that President Obama, so this was spring, late winter of 2014. Midterms were coming up in 6-8 months. Historically, presidents nearly always lose this. Historically, presidents have lost the House at some prior period, and they typically lose the Senate at the 6-year mark. I think that's right. I think historically, if you sort of think back, the presidents typically lose the Senate at the 6-year mark. Sometimes earlier, but they rarely keep the Senate through their whole time period. And which meant that there was both House investigations and Senate investigations. And I really think that he thought that he would be the subject, he and the White House would be the subject of numerous investigations, and that he really needed somebody who had spent a lot of their career doing that, and I had. So starting U.S. Attorney's Office, the Iran-Contra investigation for Congress, all the investigative work I did with President Clinton, both inside the White House and then outside the White House, and I'd done a lot of congressional investigations and a lot of representing of cabinet officials in independent counsel investigations back in the Clinton administration. So I really spent my whole career doing this kind of stuff. And I think that that's the reason he selected me. But really, the day I had lunch with him was the first time I'd spoken to him for more than 15 seconds. He did not offer me the job on the spot. Can't remember how much later before don't think he called me. I think Kathy called me to tell me that that the president wanted me to come in, and then she and I negotiated, negotiated is the wrong word, discussed when I would come in and when she was going to leave and all that kind of stuff. And so, but that's pretty much how I got there. Same kind of thing. I hadn't worked on the campaign. And I think for that one, I had a skill set that they were interested in.
So you were there for more than 2.5 years. What would you consider to be, I guess, the most significant accomplishment of yours during that time? And maybe you just can't name one, but what would you say is your most significant accomplishment and your most significant challenge while you were there?
Well, let me start with challenge, and we'll probably come back to it. I think in some ways the most significant challenge was once we lost the Senate, that the Senate essentially shut down on judicial confirmations. And I expected that Chairman Grassley was chairman of the Judiciary Committee then, not Lindsey Graham. And I expected him to slow down. I didn't really expect him to slow down as much as he did. And I had not expected Senator McConnell to essentially stop the process. And that was enormously frustrating to me, actually. A fair number, the openings that were left, most of the openings that were in Democratic states had been filled because people still respected the blue slip, and we had the Senate. And although it's sort of at the end, right before I got there, they'd abolished the filibuster for judges below the Supreme Court. Essentially most judges got confirmed, and it was a matter of getting enough floor time and all that kind of stuff to do. But that pretty much changed. And so I spent a fair amount of time negotiating actually with Republican senators to see if we could agree on judges. Because I would remind them that the process has to start with the president nominating a judge, that they really had no role until there was a nomination. And once they figured out that without the president agreeing to nominate somebody, nothing was going to happen, I had some pretty good discussions with, and got some really good, what I thought were moderate judges that both President Obama could pick, nominate, and the Republican senator would be comfortable with. And but McConnell wouldn't move those either, even when the Republican senators would approve them. And then oddly, a significant number of them were confirmed in the Trump administration, were renominated and confirmed. And so it was mostly, look, it wasn't a majority, I don't mean that, but a significant number of them were then confirmed in the Trump administration. So it was mostly McConnell just not wanting to give Obama. It wasn't about the individual judge. It was about McConnell not wanting to fill positions that were being filled by President Obama. Anyway, that was enormously frustrating. And it took me a while to figure out that they just weren't going to play ball. They were going to pretend to play ball, but they just weren't going to play ball. I'll tell you on the accomplishment side, which is sort of more fun to talk about. The first is we didn't have any scandals. People joke, we all out of the White House joke, our biggest scandal was the day he wore the tan suit to the press conference, where the Fox News just lost their marbles over how he could have worn the tan suit that day. But we didn't really have scandals during the time I was there. Benghazi, the episode predated me. The investigation was during my tenure, but it was not really a White House investigation. It was DOD, State Department. Obviously, Susan Rice was in some sense at the center of it, but she had been ambassador to the UN at the time the events took place. And so it wasn't really even much of a White House investigation. So no scandals. And President Obama gave me a fair amount of credit for there not being scandals. I appreciated him giving me credit, but it was the tone that he set at the White House that that really was what mattered. And before I get back to the rest of it, I'm sorry this answer is too long, but
No.
so Fred Fielding had been the White House counsel at the end of the George W. Bush administration. The firm used to be named Wiley, Ryan and Fielding. That's Fred Fielding, and was a long-time Washington guy. So like everybody else, when I'm going to be White House counsel, sort of go around and see if other former White House counsel are be willing to talk to you. And I really want to talk to Fred because he'd been there at the end. And so I said to Fred, like, what should I be worried about here at the end? And he was great. He said, look, everybody in the White House knows that your time is coming to an end. And every crackpot idea they've been trying to push for the last 7 years, they know they got 1 year left, and they're going to count on people being tired and people like shopping their resume and people sort of losing focus. And everybody's going to try to get their crackpot idea through. And you got to be the person standing between these crackpot ideas and these, and these ideas coming to fruition. And I thought it was the best advice, because darn if it didn't turn out to be true. Like, all these people had these great ideas, and you could tell as they talked about them that they'd been rejected for 7 years, and they were somewhat counting on the new guy not to know that, and also to do it as it hasn't been rejected because it was a bad idea. It was been rejected because it's too progressive, or it's too this or that, and we should really go out. But they were crackpot ideas, and so I really I sort of remember that. Anyway, the other things, that was part of we didn't have scandals. I didn't let some of these crackpot ideas happen. That would have been a real mess. I really enjoyed at the White House. The word enjoyed is the wrong word, but enjoyed the clemency initiative. And those of you who Harsh, you certainly would know, but the president ended up granting clemency to over 1,700 inmates, largely drug defendants, who were sentenced at a time when the drug sentences were significantly harsher than they were in the last couple of years of the Obama administration. And for the president to do 17, he read basically 1,700 little memos that I sent him. Great work by the Department of Justice. Sally Yates did a great job on that. The person who was the pardon attorney at the end did a fantastic job on that. But I'll tell you in some ways why that was so rewarding. So much of what happens at the White House is at the policy level. So take even the ACA, which obviously is one of the great legislative accomplishments of the last 20 years. It's very policy oriented. When it gets sold how it's helping individual people. But as it's being developed, it's a series of intricate medical, economic, behavioral things that get thrown together. The thing about the Clemency Initiative is that we're actually helping an individual person, and we're impacting their life. They're impacting the life of their spouse, their kids, their parents, their cousins, and we didn't get to know them personally, but by reading their files and the like, we really got to know these people. And there was an enormous feeling of responsibility that President Obama made clear to me, which was, it just took one of them who'd gotten clemency and was released to go out and commit a horrific murder, and the program would have ended. And because it politically, it just couldn't have sustained that. That's always a danger. People are always saying this is a terrible thing to do because of recidivism and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't happen, but part of that was trying to pick the right people that we thought had a chance of actually succeeding in the community. But that was an enormously rewarding thing. And I will tell you that people from around the White House who didn't work for me came to me and said, I really want to work on your Clemency Initiative. I've talked to people who work on it. They tell me how rewarding it is. So I had people from the staff secretary's office and the vice president's office and the first lady's office and ledge affairs. I had people from all over the White House who, they may not have done a lot, but who helped work up the memos on these people. And when they grant 1,700, he didn't grant everyone I recommended to him. Let me put it that way. He's the president. I wasn't the president, so that was rewarding. I'll tell you that the last thing I'll just mention, which is kind of relevant today, that arose really out of Michael Brown, which is the president put together, I can't remember exactly what the title was, but something like a task force on 21st century policing, which had law enforcement, civil rights. It wasn't called Black Lives Matter then. It was a different, I just can't remember the name of it, but we had some youth who had been involved in the protests after Michael Brown. And they just did it. And so I helped put that together, and in some ways was the liaison between the White House and the Department of Justice, and helped run that from afar. And they just came up with terrific recommendations for police departments, many of which have been adopted, obviously some of which have not been adopted, but that was rewarding. It felt tangible. It felt real. As I say, a lot of police departments implemented that, and I really enjoyed that.
So I'm actually really glad you brought up the Clemency Project, because that's something that's very personal for me. Actually, I was one of the attorneys who represented people filing the clemency petitions.
Oh, great.
And the gentleman that I represented, his petition was granted on President Obama's very last day of office. So I remember that last day getting the call from the White House Counsel's office saying that the petition for this gentleman had been granted. And it was just the most amazing feeling at that time, because it was literally the last day of the presidency. And I was sure that time had run out and it was not going to happen.
So I will tell you something that you'll appreciate then. Probably inauguration days was Friday. And so the week before, I gave him a big binder. I don't remember how many were in it, but a big binder. And he gave it back to me, I think on Friday. I don't know, the exact days don't matter, but you'll get the point. And he gave it back to me with, he has a backwards check since he's left-handed. So he would check. So there's always an action, grant, deny, discuss or something. And he gave it back to me, and he started to say, Neil, this has been such a good project. Really appreciate it. I said, Mr. President, I have a binder bigger than that coming for you on Monday. And so this was the Monday before he's leaving office. On that Friday, he's packing, he's got going away parties. And I thought there was a decent chance he was going to take my head off, because it was a lot of work, and he paid attention. And I can tell you, he really paid attention. He called me every time I gave him a binder. There were half a dozen that he wanted to talk about, and he didn't always agree with me. Maybe more than half a dozen, but they were all. But he didn't just check. He read these things, but he took it and said, "Okay, I'll try to get back to you tomorrow or whatever." So a day or two later, but he knew what his deadline was, and so you were in that last binder that I thought he was going to throw back in my face. But he, like I, really wanted to clear the deck. We had told inmates and lawyers that, there's kind of a deadline here. You can't get these to us on December. You can't get them to justice on December 15th and expect the president to have ruled on them by December 15th. We probably had some, but we had various cutoffs, and then we violated the cutoffs. But I'm pretty sure you're in that last binder.
So let's jump back, if we can, to the judicial nominations point, because I know that that's something that's very, very salient tonight in particular, but also it's been salient for the last 4 years. Can you describe a little bit more about what the process of picking the right candidate was like in the Obama administration, especially when you had to negotiate with Republican senators and they were maybe presenting names that in your opinion, were not the best choices?
Yeah. So I had, so I mean, this was not, in some ways with the Republicans particularly, this was not easy. I mean, look, we thought, wasn't certain, but we thought Secretary Clinton was going to be the next president. President Trump has periodically said, I can't believe why President Obama left all those openings. Well, President Obama didn't leave any openings. Mitch McConnell left those openings. I assume that Trump knew that, but he would jab Obama periodically for having all these openings, which was not our thing. I thought as I was negotiating with the Republican senators, and I would say to them, look, I'm not gonna, the president has to be proud of every nominee. Every nominee doesn't have to be progressive. I get it. You're not going to recommend me. You're not going to agree on somebody who's way lefty, but it's got to be somebody the president is proud to say, I nominated this person. And so that's a constraint. And I'd rather leave it open than have President Obama nominate somebody who's going to turn out to be a kind of judge that he won't be proud to have nominated. And so I was, and they knew that. And as a result, I really worked with them. Now, I spent a lot of time, there are a lot of openings in Alabama. So I spent a fair amount of time with Senator Shelby and Sessions, who were just great characters to sort of deal with. So we would talk about various candidates and they didn't like them. And then we met once and they said, well, let's stop talking about district judges. Let's talk about the Court of Appeals slot. There was a Fifth Circuit judge who, and they said, Neil, it was mostly Senator Shelby talking. I actually kind of like Shelby. He said, Neil, I got an idea for you. Why don't we agree that we'll give you 3 names and you'll pick one of the 3? And I said, Senator, I got a better idea. Why don't you give me 3 names? And if I like one of them, I'll pick one of them. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to agree with you in advance that I'm going to pick one of your 3 names, because I'm pretty sure I know what's going to come. Oh, Neil, you can't. No, Neil. So anyway, that sort of fell apart. And then we ended up knowing that they would never agree to nominating Abdul Kalan, who's a very spectacular district judge down in Alabama. We nominated him for the Fifth Circuit and he didn't go anywhere. And is now still a fantastic district judge down there. But that's sort of the way I thought about it. As I say, I did not have that many openings in blue states to fill. It was mostly openings in red states, and that was really sort of the process. I'll tell you, I got a little. So I do hope that ACS. I don't want to be critical of anybody, but there's all this written about how Leonard Leo really picked all the judges that the Trump administration has put in. I have no idea if that's true or not. But I do think, and I would talk to ACS periodically in some of these places where I didn't particularly have any connections about, can't you recommend people to me? Like, some judge in Utah. Well, I don't know any lawyers in Utah. So, but ACS has a chapter, I think, probably in Utah. I do hope ACS focuses a little more on helping out assuming there's a Biden administration, which is the theory, I think, of this presentation. I do hope that a mechanism is developed to recommend people. Now, a fair number of senators have these selection committees. Mm-hmm. And so in some part of this, maybe ACS recommending people to apply to the judge selection committee that the senators have put together. So, but anyway, that's sort of what I did, because I, as I say, just within a couple of months of me showing up, we lost the Senate, and Grassley made it pretty clear that things were not going to move very quickly.
Well, that's actually a great segue to kind of talking about the Obama administration to talking about the future. And, when we talk about building a progressive administration, as you pointed out, that could be a potential Biden administration in 2021. It could be maybe another administration in 2025 or 2029. I think the assumption is that at some point in the future, there will be an administration with a more progressive bent than the current administration, or maybe that the current administration will turn over a new leaf. I don't know. But regardless, what role do you see for the White House Counsel's office in that situation? For, what kind of candidates do you think they're going to pick when it comes to picking people from the more progressive side?
Yeah. So I do think one thing that's happened, and I think this is, you may correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that confirmations no longer need 60 votes at all, not just judges. I think that generally confirmations no longer that's right on executive branch.
That's correct.
So I think that look, I heard you at the beginning say you're a 501c3, and so by saying this, I'm not advocating a Biden administration. I'm using it as a hypothetical. If Biden doesn't win, then we could hope for a new Trump administration. Although I think that would really be an exercise in faith. But I think if we get the Senate, we need Democrats. Remember, I served in 2 Democratic administrations, so I think I can identify who I am. But if we get the Senate as well as then President Biden, I think that we will see more. I think we'll see significantly more diversity, significantly more diversity, obviously, than the Trump administration, which has almost no diversity. And I think it'll be diversity both in sort of demographic characteristics, but also in experience. I think people like Senator Warren are going to be pushing hard for it not to be sort of just the usual suspects who are going to get the top positions. And so I think it'll be quite a progressive administration. Having said that, if there's a President Biden will set the tone of the administration. Anybody who agrees to serve has to agree that progressive or not progressive, they're implementing President Biden's agenda. And sort of part of my thing about loyalty, that sort of is part of what comes with it. But I think we'll have a lot more diversity. I think we'll have a lot more diversity in types of people and backgrounds at various different senior positions. And I think it'll be quite sort of energizing if that's what happens. In terms of the role of the White House Counsel's office, we were less involved in selecting, although I was somewhat involved in selecting on cabinet officials, but mostly involved in making sure that there weren't scandals or blow-ups in the backgrounds of the senior people. The Trump administration didn't really care about that. They had sort of person after person who would blow up after announcement and even before nomination. I sort of joked to somebody, if that had happened to me once, the president would have called me in and said, don't ever let it happen again. And if it happened again, I would have been unemployed. Because those are preventable. I mean, those with the right kind of vetting and background check and interview of the person, you can figure all that out if you care about it. And so I spent more of my time, some on selecting, but really, I wasn't the one canvassing, except for the Supreme Court nominee, where we eventually selected Merrick Garland. That was my responsibility. But except for Merrick, between, I may be down to help select the Secretary of Defense when they're down to 2 candidates or something, but I'm not out looking for the 6 candidates to take to the president and get him to whittle down. I was mostly involved in the vetting process to make sure that we weren't going to pick somebody who was going to turn out to be a problem for the president. Because before President Trump, each of those mess ups was a big deal. The thing about President Trump is he just has one every day, and so none of them on their own. It turns out to be a very big deal.
So that's kind of a good segue. Sorry, you're getting a little bit of an echo. But do you anticipate a different tone from the next administration to kind of follow on the tone set by the current administration, that they're going to be a little bolder in picking candidates, or less, more willing to pick people who may have had controversies in the past? Or do you see kind of a return to the, I guess, kind of the priorities and policies set by the Obama administration?
So I think, I remember President Obama, there was some issue that I actually remember, but I think I can't tell you which issue it was, and it doesn't matter for this purpose. But we got in some procedural fight. The president was ticked off because he wanted to debate the policy. He didn't want to debate like when we should have told Congress. I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but he wanted to have a fight about the policy. And I think we'll see the President Biden administration want to return to fights about policy, and which includes obviously progressive policies. But I think we'll get away. I think he'll get away again, if assuming he's elected, from picking people with built-in controversies, because he's not going to want to focus on that controversy and the problem. He's going to want to focus on the forward-looking policy and what the forward-looking policy is, and he's going to want to get rid of the noise. So does that mean, and I put someone with progressive views as part of fighting about the policy, and a controversy over, I believe I'm not a climate change. I believe in climate change. That's part of the policy discussion, and I would say that's not a controversy. For example, I use kind of an obvious example, but I think he'll stay away from the kind of people who bring baggage that's unrelated to the whatever policy he wants to find. Because I think what he's going to want to do, and again, this is not I'm not urging anybody to vote for anybody, but let me put it this way: if Biden is elected president, it will be in some measure because the country wants to go back and talk about things that impact people again, and not calling people names. And what was the questions he was asked by Leslie Stahl too harsh, and sort of all that stuff that's a lot of noise and drama, but doesn't actually have any impact on anybody's life. I think that's where he's going to want.
So we've got a lot of people watching who I think are particularly interested in serving in the next administration. So do you have any advice for them on how they can better improve their chances? What kind of candidates typically tend to kind of rise to the top of the file?
Sure. So I have a couple of thoughts about that. First is, I think it is partially because it's the reason I gave my loyalty talk a little bit earlier. If they're going to want people who have some demonstrated interest in public service. I mean, if you've, I don't want to. I'm trying to pick a area of law that, I probably just didn't pick, because there'll be somebody on the phone who'll say, what are you talking about? So, but look, if all you've ever done is sat at your desk for, 40 hours a week and done whatever project, and you've never volunteered for pro bono, you're not, I mean, everybody on the phone probably has some connection with ACS. You haven't shown any interest in democratic politics or politics at all. There has to be, you can't just suddenly decide I'm not that happy being in a law firm, and it's now time for me to do something more fun. I think I'll go be deputy AG. It's like, it's not really going to happen.
Mhm.
I won't do anything to identify this person, but not too long ago, a person approached me and said that the person, I won't even identify gender, wanted to work on the Biden campaign, and did I have sort of any advice? And could I put him in touch with anybody? Well, the person had just left the Trump administration. And I was like thinking to myself, what do you think? Like, who do you think is going to hire you or to work on the Biden campaign when you've just left the Trump administration? It is not like you went out in some big, I resigned because I'm, now with a, Lincoln Project or something. And so I do think you have to have some demonstration of interest in this kind of work to be kind of accepted. The other thoughts I have is everybody wants to work at justice, but I'll tell you, having been White House counsel, there's an enormous amount of really important law being done at HHS, where the ACA is at the moment. DHS has to be completely revamped in light of what's happened there in the last 3.5 years. And various Department of Labor, an important place to work. SEC is an important place to work. I know that's independent, but I just use that as an example. So you should also get out of your head that senior job at the Justice Department is really the only one that's right for me. There are a lot of really great jobs that are really important in the various different agencies, and I would sort of encourage. One of my deputies became general counsel at Department of Energy, working for Ernie Moniz, which had to be one of the most fascinating jobs ever, and is now an energy lawyer. I think he's now at Latham & Watkins, if I'm right on that. But there are a lot of interesting places. And then the only other thing I would say on this is I think ACS is going to sort of help with a talent bank. I assume the transition will put together something if assuming Biden is elected. And I would use the contacts you have to try to get in the door with a recommendation from somebody who's a little closer to the inner circle than you are. Because after this 4 years, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be offering to serve. And there are going to be a lot of super talented people. And the problem for the Biden administration, if there is one, will be to how to select which the best would be. And so I would use every avenue that you can. And being part of ACS shows a commitment to public service and to the rule of law and all that. So I think that's important.
I think that's a great kind of segue to asking questions from the attendees. So as a reminder, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A feature, and we'll get those, and we're happy to kind of take those as they come. So Neil, there's a question that came in regarding judicial nominees, and specifically your experience with judicial nominees under a Republican Senate, and the question is kind of asking you to predict regarding judicial nominees next year. Do you anticipate that Democrats will be more aggressive when it comes to judicial nominees, that they'll kind of learn a few, kind of take a leaf out of the current administration's books and picking candidates more quickly, and younger candidates, so to speak?
So I think that, think and hope that look, there's a lot of criticism sort of of the Obama administration for not moving more quickly during the first 2 years when we had the Senate. Had 60 votes in the Senate. We had the Senate through the first 6 years. But look, one of the reasons that Senator McConnell has been able to confirm so many people is that the Senate doesn't do anything. And so it has nothing but, there's a certain amount of hours that have to be devoted to debate on these judicial nominations on the floor. Well, President Obama was getting ACA passed, and there were other things, and he also needed 60 votes at the time, and till the very end, he needed 60 votes to confirm these judges, and so there was a lot of filibustering of various different judges. So I think the criticism of the White House on that is pretty unfair. I think we'll see younger judges, more progressive judges. What I don't think we'll see, though, is the obviously unqualified judges. There are so many district judges who have been nominated and confirmed by the Senate who've never set foot in a courtroom. And it's kind of appalling. This is not a skill that, I mean, you know, Harsh, you're basically a trial lawyer. I mean, this is not a skill you like basically learn very quickly just sitting on the bench. This is, you know, you gotta, if you're gonna be an effective judge, you get your first trials the first day you walk in the door. There's not like a, you know, like a learning period. And the Republicans have nominated and confirmed a significant number of judges who are plainly not qualified. We will not see that, I don't think. I think we'll see highly qualified people with various different ethnic and demographic diversity, and as I said before, experiential diversity, but who are highly qualified to be district judges and Court of Appeals judges, and hopefully Supreme Court justices.
So one point you brought up earlier is selection committees by senators when it comes to judges. And one of the commenters raised the issue that those have kind of come under significant fire lately, especially from the progressive side, by arguing that they tend to kind of prioritize connections over qualifications and tend to kind of hurt diversity. Do you have an opinion on that, or do you think the process should be more centralized in the White House Counsel's office the way it is under the current administration and step away from selection committees?
Well, there weren't that many selection committees that I had to deal with. And I think most of them were where there were a Republican and a Democratic senator, and they wanted to agree. And so they put together a selection committee to help the two of them give each other political cover. Do you know what I mean? And so, so I didn't really have, so I see that theoretically that's right, and that selection committees are a bunch of people at great big law firms who are picking people just like them to be the judges. I get that as a criticism. I'm not entirely sure that it's factually true. But I do feel very strongly that that's not an inherent problem, that if the senator were to say to the selection committee, look, here's what I want you to come to me with. I want 3 names, 2 of them have to be diverse, and one of them has to be, at least one of them has to be not from, you know, one of your big law firms, that the senators can put what they want to the selection committee. So it's not inherent in the selection committee unless the senators just send them off. And frankly, I would hope that after what's happened for the last 4 years, that senators will really focus on this. There were Democratic senators, not one name of which I will give, who I couldn't get to recommend names to me. And, you know, basically, if you want a district judge in a blue state and the senator doesn't agree with you on the selection, it's not getting, that he or she's not getting confirmed. A little less true with Court of Appeals probably, but with district judges, you really need the local, even without the blue slip process, you need the local senators to be in agreement, or else it'll never come up with a vote because the chairman will never actually vote for it. But they've got to focus, and I think there were some senators who just were not getting me names, and I would say, look, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in November of 2014, but if things don't go well, you're not getting a judge, and I just couldn't get them to focus, and I just got to focus, and I would think that the last 4 years would cause them to focus better than they did in my era.
So we'll close, I think, with one last question, and I will kind of ask one that I've kind of distilled a little bit from our conversation, which is kind of looking towards the future, given kind of all these different hats that you've worn, all these different things. If there's kind of a wish that you can make, not regarding who wins the election, but regarding how the White House Counsel's office functions over the next 4 years, kind of what would that wish be?
Oh, well, that's interesting. So the White House, the White House Counsel's office, which has come under some attack, this book that Bob Bauer and Jack Goldsmith have out, I think is sort of recommends a pretty strong restructuring their White House Counsel's office. I don't agree with it. I like those guys. I don't agree with them at all on this subject, but really thinks they really argue that the advice function should be returned to the Justice Department and not really be residing in the White House. I think that's wrong and a mistake. But I do think that whoever the White House counsel is, and it has to remember that they're paid by public funds and they represent the office of the presidency, not the president of the United States. And maybe because both times I did this, I was already pretty well established and it would not have mattered to me if I'd been fired. But I think that things have happened in the last 4 years that you wonder why the White House counsel didn't resign. And I think there has to be sort of a return to integrity and a recognition that this is your client is the American public. It's obviously it's that president, but more broadly, it's the office of the presidency. And so decisions have to be made to protect the office of the presidency. And I hope that we return to that. I never felt any conflict in that when I was working for President Obama, or frankly for President Clinton. And you would have thought there might have been some attention because President Clinton was under sort of personal investigation for so much of the time. Never felt the slightest conflict from him. It's clear that Don McGahn felt a significant conflict, and I don't know about Pat Cipollone.
Thank you. And I think that's kind of the perfect note to end on. I would make one final note. I'd like to thank ACS National for setting up this platform. I would, of course, like to give a huge thank you to Neil Eggleston for donating his time to be here with us. Hopefully, before the panel started, we were talking and Neil had indicated that he doesn't speak as often to ACS groups as he would like to. So hopefully this will be the start of many conversations that we have, that we and other chapters will have with him. I'd like to give another shout out and thank you to all of our co-sponsors. And I would note that our board member, Marissa Diskowski, has very helpfully put all of our social media handles into the chat. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram. You can check out our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page. We also have a YouTube channel now, and this entire talk should be on that YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks. So look out for that. Again, with a big thank you to Neil. We will call it a night. Thank you to everyone. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Harsh. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.